All right, now we're heading.
Today's date is Tuesday, April 1st. This is meeting of the curriculum committee. We are joined also today by Karen Jones, and Matt Bergeron will be joining us virtually.
All right, and Matt's here. So let's move on. So special ed programming, since Karen's here, we're going to get started, but I'm going to start with a couple questions Kelly asked, if you don't mind, Kelly. And I appreciate bringing them up. And I know that was a question some of the board members asked as well. Is in February, I came out and I had a couple things that I was going to add to the budget, right? So that was a special education classroom and a social worker. I will be very honest, in February, I did not realize how big the gap was that we had when it came down to the budget, right? And I didn't even pronounce a gap at the February meeting, so then when we came into fruition of that, wow, we are at like, it was like 1.3 million at one point, and we got down to 800,000 and figuring that out. That was the reality that some hard decisions are going to have to be made. So a lot of those hard decisions was, what can we continue to do for our students and help support them? What can we add in that's new, if anything? Because, with a $800,000, $1 million gap, typically you're cutting, not adding. And, the goal was not to cut or change anything. So the special ed program, I'm going to have Karen talk about that. The full-time social worker, we looked at what are the needs that we absolutely have to do in order to change our program to be contractually sound, making sure that our social worker in the high school is not overworked, but still trying to meet some of the needs for our students. So the point 4 was really like, because again, we're strapped. The point is we can't really be adding more, and the budget is not going to get any better. I got to be very honest. We're still at that 2% tax cap. We're only getting very limited amount of money with safe harmless from year over year. So we're not looking at, and it's going to be tax burden. So it's going to become even more difficult as the years go on, especially if federal money changes. So we looked at the bare minimum of what we can do. And the decision I had to make was, do I keep everything now, or do I cut things to add things? So do I not hire a 3rd grade teacher through the attrition of the retirement? So then we increase class sizes at the elementary school, but we can offer X. Or we cut a security monitor, or we cut a dean, or we cut a TOSA, or we cut this. Because in the past few years, we've been adding, right? During COVID, we had the AIS teacher that we added. We took that on in our general fund. When the COVID money was gone, that added on. So we're going to keep all of those things. We just can't be adding more where we're going to burden the district. And then Karen's going to talk a little bit about the special ed programming. When we looked at the special ed programming in the beginning of the year, we start publicly and transparently talking about what we're going to do, right? How can we add? How can we change what we're doing? How can we do things differently and be creative? And we did that publicly. We included staff into that conversation, which, as Karen noted, made it more personal, right? Having that conversation. And we're trying to look at it. Needs have changed a little bit. And we can't offset that cost because no one's going to be coming in. They didn't have a need for the current program, because that was one of the goals. If we can have people come in, the nice thing is then it would offset that cost. But right now, some of those districts are building programs of their own. So they don't need a program like ours. And some of our needs have changed. So did I kind of hit it, Karen? I feel like I might have said everything you just wanted to say.
No, I mean, I think that you said everything. I mean, we are planning this. We're looking at our population and our numbers in October and November to plan for this. The needs of the students do change some.
Yep.
And then we also have to be fiscally responsible. So when we're looking at a situation like this and Frank comes to me, then we have to relook at things and say, okay, so how do we become more creative to still meet the needs of students and still be fiscally responsible? And I think that we continue to have those conversations. I'm having conversations with staff and with administrators to see how we can best support these students.
One of the things I just want to clarify, Karen, I just want to be a little careful in our conversation because our population is very, very small. And if we're talking about students who may be in need or not in need of special education programming, it might be very easy to identify those students. So I don't want to talk specific, like we just want to be very careful. Like that's one thing we talked about, especially with recording and everything else. We just want to be very careful on like how we describe some of these things. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Oh, so the 2 aides.
Yes.
Is it that, because I know the whole program budgeting is just not
Yep.
going to work. And that includes those 2 aides. We can't keep that.
So they're teacher assistants.
Teacher assistants.
Yep. And let me clarify one of them.
Okay,
One is retiring in the high school.
okay.
Okay. This year we hired somebody
Mhm.
for a specific student.
Yep.
That student is no longer in the district.
Okay.
That person, though, we did not let go
Yeah.
of. We kept them and we're adding them onto extra duties
Okay.
to be able to fulfill them. But technically,
Yeah,
their person who they were hired
Okay.
is no longer here.
gotcha.
We're not going to fill the high school position. That person, instead of letting them go mid-year,
Okay,
we're going to fill them over to that position
okay.
because where they were was not needed any longer. So we're putting them where needed. So really, we're not losing anything
Okay,
because the person already isn't here that they
I
were the
see.
one-to-one for.
okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So we're not losing anything
Okay.
that's currently here,
Okay,
except for the one that we have filling in on things that
okay. Yep.
didn't, I mean, technically, could we have let that person go? We could have, but we're
Yeah.
using them for other purposes,
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
right? Because we've already budgeted for it. We
Yeah,
already have. the need.
Okay,
But does that make sense?
yes, that makes sense now.
And I know I've had some questions about that, so
Mhm.
I'm glad I could be able to clarify
Yeah,
that one.
no, thank you.
Is that person continued to be budgeted for in the upcoming?
No, so since we have the retiree who's leaving,
Okay.
we're going to keep that person budgeted, but the retiree is now gone.
Right.
So we
Gotcha.
didn't budget for the retiree. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so and that's the attrition component of it.
Okay.
And it's a little bit of breakage because that person's been here for a while, but with TAs, it's not a huge amount of breakage as it would be comparison to a teacher who's been here for 20 years in comparison to a teacher who's been here for 1 year, right? That's a lot of, that's a big different amount of money.
I guess I left the last meeting thinking that although it was to be a 12-1-1 in title.
Yeah.
That we certainly wouldn't have been maxed out initially, and that someday down the road, I didn't think that that was the goal initially. I thought that we had enough need in district to warrant this. So I'm concerned that there's.
Yeah. She can take it.
I need to.
So, yeah, so in November, we could justify running that program with the number of kids that we had in district in November. Needs have changed. And even we could justify it running the program with the number of kids that we had. If we had students come from other districts, it would be a no-brainer.
Because there's no cost in that.
We would
But
be
the
able
need has
to-
drastically changed by at least 3 or 4 students.
Okay. So since January, there's been a change, because that's when we talked.
Yes.
Here was January.
Yep.
Okay. That's because I was getting lost in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to be clear as we've been talking about this, just because we're not offering the program, and again, we've never offered a program like this
Yeah.
before. This is a different option that we were looking at trying. It doesn't mean we're not trying new things. We're just looking at how do we do things and maximize the staffing that we currently have. That means, we have TAs, we have special education teachers, we have assistant principals, right? How do we utilize those people in new ways to be able to do that? Karen and I've talked about it. There's been frameworks that I've worked in other districts that utilize their staff that they have in different ways for specific students or specific needs, especially for students with behavioral issues. That really is something that we're going to look at be focusing in on here as well. So there's options. Go ahead, Ben.
So without the program that we were talking about,
Yeah.
the student needs that we have now are going to be met, and they're going to be met without overburdening staff.
Correct. Either that or placement. Correct. Like, if it can't be met here, because we can stack that or get funding back on some of that. So, and which we have budgeted already in the previous. Again, some of that money again, I don't want to get into specifics of it all, but we have some of that already. But.
Okay.
Other questions?
Just another question I had. I know that when we were talking about that program, I had asked about training and so forth for people ahead of time or whatever. Is there possible potential training that maybe some of our staff need to better meet the needs
Yes.
that needs to be provided for? And are we able to?
Yes. So our staff need, there's training on autistic students, on how deregulation works for students. I'm working with behavioral students, and we're looking at finding and offering programs over the summer for staff to be able to take. Again, we're looking at budget because I did have to look at some of our PD money and had to cut some of that money. VTA still has a large amount of money that we could look and talk about if you want to. If the VTA is interested in helping supporting that, that would maybe expand some of the opportunities that we have for our students and staff. But yes, we are looking at that as well.
So we are always.
I know you are. I know. The VTA has a specific amount of funding built in through their contract.
It's district. Yes.
Earmarked for the VTA though.
And I don't like to leave money on the table.
I know, so we're going to talk about that money.
Let's do that.
But yeah, yes, there is a need. Yes, we want to use it. And yes, we want to continue that program. Other questions? Good questions. One question I just have is curriculum committee meeting. We usually talk about class sizes. I want to confirm that the group still agrees with as low as we can keep our class sizes to what we currently have been doing is where we want to stay. Am I correct in saying that?
I would think that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm looking at other places and stuff, and I know that's a value thing here in the district, and I'm just seeing other places where eventually, if unfortunately that does happen, right, in districts where if you have to increase class sizes in order to be able to keep program, that is an option, but that would be a last resort, I think. I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Any other questions on this? And if anyone does have suggestions on programming, such as like professional development that you may have heard of through like, organizations you're a part of or other districts you've been in that has really worked or you're hearing that has worked, please bring them to our attention. Because, we have options and we look into it, but someone sent me an email today about something a parent did and it was like, oh, this is great. I had no idea. So please share anything that you might know. We're always looking for opportunities. Okay. Oh, Karen. I told Karen she would have to stay for the whole meeting. She's like, you're dismissing me, right? I'm like, no, I'm going to make you stay. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate your time. Okay, and now it's Karen Conroy.
Oh, actually, can you go back?
Oh,
to
my
the
bad.
slide Just for a second.
Okay.
Open enrollment for acceleration. So I want to talk a little bit about middle school and students having access to algebra. That has come up a few times over the years. We've certainly had conversations at the local level. One of the comments that comes up is access to calculus. And then the other side that comes up is, well, how many kids actually go all the way and then take calculus? And so bringing more students in and taking calculus. But there is also the idea that, we are enabling more flexibility for students with their high school selections if they walk in the door with a credit, with a high school credit.
And Karen, refresh my memory. So if you are a 7th grader and you do not go into accelerated math or algebra, by the time you're a senior, you would not be able to take
You wouldn't be able to
calculus
take
because. Okay.
Unless for some reason you did something on your own, summertime, and were able to, jump.
And how many math credits do you need to graduate high school?
3, right?
Right. I just want to clarify because
3.
not everyone knows, or people who
Yeah,
maybe
so
are
not
even
everybody
watching
can
this,
take
right?
that.
So I just want to clarify for anyone watching. So you need 3 math credits to graduate high school. So that means 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, or the accelerated 8, 9, 10.
Correct.
And then you could take electives or further your math.
Or further in math, we offer AP Stats and AP.
Correct. Right. Or an opportunity for other electives or 8, 9, 10.
Exactly.
You could do BOCES and have more
That's
opportunity
right.
to be
So
like
now
a
you have
CTE
more
program.
flexibility.
So-
There's somebody else with that experience
My 2 oldest children were both accelerated, and my youngest is double accelerated. They skipped them through 7th and 8th grade. So as a 7th grader, she's taking.
And I have one student that has been in that program and one who's not. So I have a little experience with that
I
as
have
well.
both as well.
Yep.
From here. So, yes, So I wanted to kind of take a look at the history of how what our cohorts look like with terms. You can go to the next slide, Mr. McCree.
And Matt, you got all that? Because I know you're out of everyone in the room, you might not be as most familiar with all this stuff. So Barbara, you too. Like, I just want to make sure that you guys understand how it works a little bit before we even talk about it.
I think so, but because I think I am. If I have questions, I'll be sure to ask them.
Please, I just want to make sure that everybody.
Yeah, no, and I
I
appreciate
want
that.
to make sure that I just don't assume everybody knows how this works.
Yeah.
So good.
So I just wanted to look a little bit, I don't know if you can see that well, about
Oh my
on our history, that's maybe 8 years. So you can see how many students took calculus in 23, 24, and then the years before, how many kids were in that cohort when they were in algebra. So you had, and then I have the percentage on the side. So it ranges from, 65% all the way up. I actually have one class. Which one? My daughter's class.
84%.
So there must have been a couple students who came in, or for some reason my number wasn't showing. I wasn't able to access some number in eSchool for some reason, maybe. But that's what it looks like from what I could grab. And it stands to reason that, certainly not everybody takes calculus, but even if we had a larger cohort who are exposed to algebra in 8th grade, even the lowest, the 65%, let's take 50 kids. If we had 65% of those 50 kids go on to be able to take calculus, that's still larger than any of our cohorts there. That'd be like 32, 33 kids. So that's just a little history on how our kids, what our kids do and what they choose. So in an effort to provide maybe less bias and more student opportunity, I wanted to share a proposal for a pilot, this open for any pilot discussion with our committee here today. So not that everyone has to take algebra in 8th grade, but how about being able to allow them to choose to accelerate if they wanted to? So let's consider this for a second. And so you don't have to test into it necessarily. I kind of like the idea of recommendations versus requirements. Now, Ms. Olson and I have talked about an idea of piloting with our current 6th grade students. Could you go one more slide?
Yeah.
Thank you. And I just want to remind people that right now we use a rubric and it tests, and that's not up there, but we would continue to use that rubric. The rubric takes a look at mapping tests and quiz grades. It takes a look at the TOMAGs, which is the test of mathematical aptitude and giftedness that we give students who are interested at the end of 6th grade, or maybe this time of year in 6th grade. And we have some other pieces that may be a little bit more subjective. Things like student or teacher would go through it with considerations like conceptual understanding, work habits, attendance, those kinds of things that can bring in. And at some point we say, here's the gap between those who are, really high on this rubric and not. And we always have some questions about those things too. So I would propose that we keep doing that rubric next year, and then you'd have your group of students for who, yes, absolutely, we are inviting them into algebra. But could we also offer an open registration for students and parents who would like to know more and maybe want to be accelerated in 7th grade? That's the 7th grade 7X we call it, where you do the math for 7th grade. It's fast paced and you get through the 8th grade as well. But maybe they weren't part of that fishing net that caught everybody for the rubric. Now we have these additional students who might be interested. We talked about offering an evening event that Ms. Olson and I and Ms. Seberg, our 7th grade math teacher, would hold to provide information. And we could do that for all parents, but especially for those parents who are considering this option. And then comes the part where we would want to meet with the parents and look down and so they can make an informed decision. They would we would say, okay, let's take a look at your performance in class, how you've done over the year, how you do on the STAR assessment, if you took the state assessment, those types of things, so that we can have a conversation with the parent and the student so that they can be informed and really think about it and say, yeah, I think I can do this, or you know what? Maybe I don't want to go that fast. And if you go to the next slide, we wanted to think about some safety nets in place for those students. So 7X, if the students and parents decided that this was an option they'd like to take and they hadn't been already put in there. Now, we always do kind of check in with those students who are accelerated, but we would progress monitor at the 3-week interval, the 6-week interval, the report card. And that would continue in the next semester. If at any point the student wanted to integrate back into the regular 7th grade math, we can do that. There's no harm in integrating back into that class. At the end of the year, the student's not stuck taking algebra. Again, you kind of have that opportunity to think about how fast that went, think about the skills and have a moment to reflect on if you were ready to, if you felt like you were ready to do that accelerate. And I think by the end of the year, you'll probably before then, you'll know whether or not this is something for you. And that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I'll just clarify a couple of things. There's been many studies done on rubrics, testing, things like that, on advancing students and, picking choices. And a lot of it comes down to equity and inclusion in the classroom. And a lot of places are stating you should have open enrollment where you give an opportunity for a child to say, I want to excel, or a parent to say, I want to excel, with the safety nets, with the idea that if I have a 70 and I sit down, I want to do this and I want understanding, but I'm not having that conversation about what my real skill set is, you're not doing a child a process. There's been multiple studies done shown that in districts that have done this, where done open enrollments for AP courses or higher level courses or advanced regions courses, that you see an increase. I will tell you flat out, I was a part of a district who did this, and our racial inequalities and aspects of the data that changed dramatically when we changed it from an open enrollment to a testing based. And it was dynamic on the change in results that we received. And again, I think this one is a little bit different, but I just want to kind of share there's many studies out there about this and giving an opportunity for children. And I know there's some naysayers or negatives about this too, that people are like, well, this isn't always the same. But one of the things I think is important is just because you're accelerating a student, it doesn't mean that they have to have a 95 every single time they take a Regents exam, right? And some people are like, well, if they want to take it, I want them to be successful. And sometimes that success is a 90, it's not, but success can be an 80. And that's okay, so.
We want students to have
Yeah.
perseverance and grit. We want students
Right.
to be able to challenge themselves. So what is, to me, it becomes all right, so maybe this is not the absolute highest group of students taking math. Maybe we've expanded it and maybe our scores are not quite as high as they were in the Regents, but now we have students who are walking in the door with a high school credit and feeling accomplished and have challenged themselves. I don't know. I see it as a benefit. I see it as a positive.
And the teacher is in favor of it.
Yep. Well, I haven't said, are you in favor of this? But I mean, she said she's doing the nights and
She's been involved in
all
this
three of them
process.
have been, our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers have discussed it. Brianna and I met with our department supervisor, and since then, Brianna has talked to the teachers.
They haven't raised any concerns.
Not that I've heard of.
I also like that, when it leads towards flexibility when you get into high school, because, my oldest didn't end up taking calculus but it freed her up for
Right,
her-
so for the program
the
she
program
ended up
she's in
doing.
now.
Yeah.
So I think that, giving flexibility to kids is a good thing.
And it's a
and
pilot.
it isn't
It
always
doesn't-
about that. What's the grade on the Regents?
No.
I mean,
Well,
that's
it's
not a.
But I want to just say, like, when I came here and we had this conversation, is everybody had the expectation that we always have to be here at the highest level. And I want to just kind of be clear. Sometimes it's okay not to always be at the top, as long as we're getting kids to meet the potential that they didn't realize.
And we need the community to understand that as well. It's because it's the criticism that comes.
Oh, you're not number 2 anymore. You're not number 1.
So if those criticisms that come of, well, they're dropping and okay, that we have to be okay.
But
with
instead of
what
high
that
expectations
is.
for this group, it's broadens the group off of that. too.
So,
Matt.
oh, I'm sorry.
So-
Did I interrupt?
Nope.
No, let's ask questions. Go.
No, so I think you either specifically said it or you alluded to it, and potential negatives or cons to this. And all I'm picking up on so far is it might cause numbers to go down. But other than that, particularly with these safe, these guardrails, what are the negatives here? I mean, this seems like a fantastic idea, and so what are the downsides to this?
So I'm not going to say. I will tell you the negatives I heard in other places that I've worked. How's that
Okay.
work?
That works. Yeah.
The kids are not at the same level that they've been in previous years, and I'm not able to cover the same amount of content that I would otherwise. I've heard that as a negative before. Like, oh, these kids are a little bit lower, and it's, I'm not being able at the same pace, or I'm not able to cover the same amount of material. That has been something, again, higher level courses, more not some through 8th grade, to be very honest with you. But that is something I've heard in the past.
Is it possible to put again, this is just,
That might be tracking
a thought that comes to mind, but can you put your invited in one class and your
no,
non-invited in another?
nah, that's considered tracking, and you
Okay.
really kind of don't want to do that.
Okay.
The way that they're grouped now, are there 8th graders in with 9th graders?
I don't know that answer.
No.
So they are separate.
They're in 8th grade, yes, our 8th grade math teacher teaches the
Teaches
algebra.
that, teaches the algebra. Okay, so this could potentially mean that the 8th grade teacher has 2 algebra classes.
Which she does, I think, this year, right?
She is this year. But it's also a very big group this year. This 8th grade is big.
Yeah.
And I will say
I
that
don't know
our
if she would normally.
cohort in 6th grade, I think it's 96 or 96 students. And they're looking at 5 sections of those core classes. So I don't think it'll be a problem if somebody wants to try it. I mean, that might be a disadvantage that a student shifts from 3rd period to 5th period or 6th period or something because they're not keeping up, or they feel like this is a little bit faster than they'd like. So
Right.
that's a disadvantage.
Their whole schedule might change.
Their schedule may change, right? So,
So that's what I wanted to ask. So you said, so at any point a kid could move from 7X back to regular 7th grade
that was
math?
what we talked about, yeah.
So like right now, April,
But
end of
that's-
3rd
But
quarter.
it's not that easy to switch because there's.
Oh, I
one
kn-
person-
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think you'd have to put. I hear what you're saying, and then it's April. Like, I think you'd have to put a safeguard in it, like by the end of the first semester, right? Because if you're not cutting it first quarter, second
I
quarter,
think those conversations now,
Yeah.
when we've had kids in
Yeah.
accelerated who are not maintaining it, right now, I think it's an 85 average,
Yeah.
right? That they have we're gonna talk to you,
Yep.
and we're gonna see if this is the right fit,
Yeah.
and you haven't been keeping up. But I mean, I think they already have some of those type of conversations in place. I can't.
Yeah, I think we would
haven't
have to
been
put a
part of
safe-
them, But
a hard
I
stop.
would be
That's a good point.
surprised if this is when we're figuring it out in April, right?
Well,
Yeah.
just times I have seen times where students accelerate and then they realize, whoa, I'm in way over my head. They try to fight it for a little while, but then February or March comes and it's like, forget it.
Forget it.
I'm just
I give
going to
up.
drop the class or I'm just going to switch to
Yeah.
something else. And I don't really think that benefits anyone. So that's why I'm curious
Yeah.
what's
Because they really
the
can't
fine
drop-
print on
they have to
changing
be in
back.
some sort of math, right? They'd have to be in
Right.
some.
Yes.
So, yeah.
and
you're
the
right.
grit is important, right? And getting kids to persevere and push forward.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good point. Like, I agree with you. By April, it's highly unlikely that they're going to be having these conversations. But if we're going to solidify this
Question,
pilot
maybe By the
program,
end of the first semester,
Yeah.
having those. you know,
I think that's a really good point.
So that'd be something to bring back and talk about.
And does that ever happen with 8th graders in algebra that they get, even though they need it to graduate, but that they get partway in and they're like, I'm not ready for this yet?
I don't think
I haven't
so.
seen it in algebra. We've seen the 7th grade where.
Yeah.
Okay.
8th grade, I
But
think,
I-
our completion rate in 8th grade, I think, is 100%.
you know, I
Right?
can't think of-
Yeah.
I can't think of anything recent.
I haven't seen it.
Could be wrong.
And this isn't for earth science yet. This is just
This is algebra
earth science.
piloting. Let's see how it goes.
Yep.
So that we can handle.
Because we have
things that
two
come
advanced
up.
programs. We have earth science and we have science and math. This is only
accelerated. That is early.
So does this idea come from because you want students the opportunity to take calculus later in high school? Or is this, yes, we want more students in calculus or students in
And
calculus
flexibility.
and for
Yeah, it's really
flexibility?
student opportunity. But in the past, that was one of the things that came up. Well, students can't take calculus if they don't have this opportunity. So that was, and then there was, well, but they don't really, most of those kids aren't taking it anyways. Well, actually, quite a few of those kids are taking it. So I just kind of dug into that aspect of it, just because I wanted to see it and then provide that.
We did have a community member reach out about everybody taking
Yeah.
algebra. They're like, I seen some schools do
And a
algebra.
lot of, yeah, some schools will do that,
Yeah.
and some schools will do double acceleration and do it in.
But
Bethlehem does
but
that
it was
too.
a couple of years worth of planning because they were teaching them 6th grade and 7th grade math. in
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
schools. And then in 7th grade, and then they kind of just tested around.
And I mean, I think we already do something pretty progressive is doing the world language, not foreign language, see, call myself, world language in 7th and 8th grade. I don't think every school does that. Pros or cons.
They're,
Well,
They're all,
I will just say you're right, not every school does that.
yeah,
And I'll leave that
yeah,
at
I've not
that.
seen that before.
I am not in favor of students challenging themselves to go ahead. Just because from a teacher standpoint, most of the time it has happened, it hasn't worked well.
Mhm.
I find that sometimes students, they feel pressure either from their parents, from their friends, they want to move into that higher class. But they just maybe don't have the ability to do that or the maturity to do that. And sometimes it just leads to struggles, then the students now struggling all over the place because they're stressed and anxious about this one class. Not that you can't cover as much material. Again, it does depend on the makeup of the class, but sometimes it is a matter of no one in this classroom is getting what they need. Because the students at the highest level that have tested in there with ease maybe are not being challenged. And then the students maybe who have opted to come in to challenge themselves, it might be too challenging for them.
Well,
And again, this has just been my
Mhm.
experience
And-
as a
and you're-
teacher of
and
seeing
I'm
that
sure
happen.
that you have seen that. I'm sure that we will see that.
And-
I'm sure
and
that will be
it's
part of our
Tough
bump.
to see.
But I do think sitting down with each family and having that conversation, really having an honest conversation, and looking and reviewing, the average TOMAG was here.
Mhm.
This is what you got. How do you feel about, looking at?
And I imagine there's going to be the honest conversation is that if you were to take this course based off of what we currently see, you may not be successful. I think we have to have a candid conversation. I don't think you can sugarcoat any of that,
No, I
right?
don't think so either.
Right?
but-
Because I don't think that
Because
does
that
it.
is-
And I've seen that. Well, you can do it. And I
Yeah.
think you have to be very honest saying,
Let's take a look.
You can do it,
But this
but
is
it
gonna
may
be
be a
work.
70
right,
and not a 92.
correct.
Would we consider a forced level change? Because moving from 7X to 7 would be like what my husband referred to as a level change, like when we move somebody from a Regents to a
Right. Or maybe do regions.
right.
Yeah.
So if students chose to accelerate themselves and were in it and really weren't being successful, would we force the level change back?
I don't know. That's
Well,
a good
We
question.
I guess
kind of
that's the
do that
question.
with the accelerated now, right?
Okay.
When students are not maintaining an
We switch from
average
7th grade to 8th grade, or
We move them from 7X back to 7.
I think so.
That's
I think
good.
so when they're not meeting the average.
It's a good thought, though, Kelly. Yeah.
Not that I want to.
I don't think it's a-
No, I know what you're saying, though.
But I think
But that
have
the
the real
teacher and administration
conversation,
need to be able to have
the real
the final
conversation.
say
Right.
in what's
What's going to
most
be helpful for
appropriate
that child?
Because sometimes, as parents, we want something for our child for whatever reason. And you might just
And it's
do the
hard
right thing.
because but we're trying to open this up, right?
Right.
It's-
And vice
it's-
versa. And I can speak on this. If you have a child that said, no, you can't do this, and the child says, no, I want to, and the parent challenges it, and then they do it and they excel, then you're doing amazing
I
things for the
didn't want my
kid.
daughter to be in the double advanced. We
Yeah.
were very adamant that she was not going to do it. And then they presented all the data as to
Yeah.
why she I said, okay, I guess I don't. But, okay.
And it did wonders for her.
And she's doing it.
So we won't know, I guess.
But I think there's some valid points here about,
Things to be aware of and be cautious moving forward.
How much flexibility do we have if, like, what happens if every kid is like,
That-
I want to do?
well, I don't think you can. Like, that's kind of in my head going, I mean,
You did, I mean, she's teaching 5 sections. That's all the kids. She
Yeah.
teaches all the kids anyways.
I think, yeah, but,
Right?
yeah.
You know, so it's,
But they're not all going to be successful.
Yeah,
I'll tell you.
I think we have to look at what their 5th grade and 6th grade is. I think we have,
How many of them were my students, so,
Yeah.
and I loved every one of them.
I think there's going to have to be those really honest conversations. And someone might have to say, I know that you want to do this. And I think you can try. But let's
talk
really
about
be
what
honest
ways
here.
We're gonna go before you.
Well,
make
and
a
I think you
decision.
have to say, you were a level 2 here, you were a level 1 here. This is what you got on your STAR exam.
Again, this is the.
The trajectory of that data is important.
So if you identify the kids that, they're opting to do it,
Mhm.
their test scores might not be completely indicative that academically they should be there, but they've got the oomph to do
Right.
it. So when is the check-in for, like, will it be like monthly?
So it's at the
or-
grade point interval, so,
3-6.
so 30 weeks in.
Okay.
First checkpoint, 6 weeks in, report card.
Got it. Okay.
So, and in the beginning, I think that's gotta be,
Yeah, so we've also
with the
got-
administrator. After that, that might be just more like the teacher saying, these 2 kids I'm worried about in this class because they're. But I do know that Ms. Olson does go through all of that.
What's our current percentage of students that are accelerated per grade level? Is it like 30%, 40? Putting you on the spot, I
I don't know.
apologize.
You are putting. me on
Yeah, I know,
the
I
spot.
apologize.
I don't know, but in the
Our
past,
grades are about 100 students.
Yeah, so
and we
like,
usually have a class 24 to 30, but as I
Yeah.
said, I think we have about 2 sections this year. So it's hard.
so anywhere between like 30, like 25 and 30% on average, right? If you have 100
on
kids,
average,
like any,
probably.
yeah.
Because I think it's usually one.
Yeah,
section.
so I can't imagine us going that much more than that. If it does
You know,
open
but
it,
we-
it might be 5 or 10
But
more
we do
kids.
know that we have parents who will reach out and want to find out and take a look at the rubric or see what happened, or, I think there, and I do not doubt that the rubric misses kids.
I agree.
And who am I to say, this rubric said this, because if Kelly had done that rubric, and maybe he would have scored that student a little differently on a couple of things, I don't know. I just,
Any other questions? We are at 5:07 and Matt has a hard stop at
I know
5:30.
Matt's busy.
all right.
Yeah.
Hang on, Matt. At the high school level.
Yeah.
There are still sort of restrictions or put into place for getting into honors and AP.
I think not in general with honors, I know for English, they had.
Like say 10th grade honors English.
10th grade honors English, they put in a couple because we had so many students
Okay.
this year, but by and large, we try very hard to allow. We may not be recommending somebody for an AP class, but if that's what they want and that's what their parents wanted, they can come back. Like we will have those recommendations of, 85 or above in algebra before you go into honors, whatever. it is. Or algebra, to take algebra 2, you had to have whatever in your. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of a good AP class, maybe AP Chem. Like if you were somebody who had a 70 in regular chemistry and then wanted to take AP chemistry,
They will tell you no. So the counselors do a very good job.
they
Why?
filter. But
Well,
we-
they won't tell you no. They will say, you're going to struggle. This might be a difficult
That's
issue for you. Here's what you had in this class. This is where they typically
definitely
are.
let students in who are not your
Mhm.
typical AP
Right.
student to be able to, when I say typical, because of the year before,
Yeah.
the past 2 years
Right.
of scores.
Okay.
Like
I can
I,
think of a couple. people.
yeah, I absolutely, like, I know the counselors have those conversations.
Mhm.
They'll say, you want to take AP stats. You've not taken an AP course before. You haven't,
Yeah.
there's a concern here. This is going to be a very difficult situation.
Yeah.
And vice versa. They'll do like, you're taking 3 AP courses. Are you sure you want to take 3 AP courses? This is a lot on your course load. They will do that as well, like
Yeah.
to those higher performing children. I think they do a nice job encouraging.
Mhm.
And
Being realistic.
I've also heard families say, like, the counselor told me that it might be difficult, but
We're gonna-
my
Yeah.
child still wants to do it, and they do it, and the
Yeah.
kids, and they have an opportunity to take themselves out if they feel that. Like that's happened as well.
Got my questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your feedback.
Good?
That was my thoughts.
Oh, all right. All right.
New York State Ed Accountability for 24-25 school year. I don't think we've talked about this yet this year, so I wanted to bring it forward. And I can talk as much or as little as you had.
How about as little?
As little as so
Sorry.
just as a reminder,
Cliff notes.
a reminder that we are actually in what they're calling the rebuild phase. So next year we'll start a whole new chapter called the reimagine phase. So COVID happened, it was put on pause for a couple of years. And then we moved into the restart phase, and now we're in the rebuild phase.
And then we'll get to the reimagine. Sorry.
And then we get to the reimagine phase where they'll have some new things for us, which I will not confuse us with and talk about today. But it is a continuous improvement system. And what I like about that is that when Teresa Billington moved over as, I think she's assistant commissioner over there now, part of what she brought, she used to be our BOCES, one of our BOCES people who did a lot of the data and talked about this stuff, is that the lens by which she's looking through is really less punitive and penalty driven, but we are all constantly looking to make continuous improvement. So everything is looked at through that. So we get identified, whatever name they're going to give or accountability title they're going to give us is going to be about continuous improvement. So they have, for the school, they have local support and improvement, which is called LSI. They have targeted support and improvement, PSI. They've got comprehensive support and improvement. For the district accountability, they've got the same thing, LSI again, and then they have, or potential, and then they have target districts. And we are given the status of LSI, local supports and improvement, meaning use your own money, look at your data, make the growth and changes that you want to make. So it's what they used to call in good standing. But they don't want to just act like it's all over. They want to say, you're always looking at your data, you're always thinking about improving. So it's kind of like that kind of, I think it's more positive. So on the next slide, you can see the accountability indicators. And I'm not sure if you want to go through any of those, but we've got the weighted average achievement level and the core subject performance level are based on our test results. So elementary and middle school, that would be your ELA and math. High school, it's ELA, math, and science. And the difference between the two is that the weighted is looking at 95% of your continuously enrolled students. And the core is looking at the students who took the test. So your refusals hurt you in the weighted because they're still counting as part of that denominator for the calculus that you're doing. But they are not hurting you as much in the core because you're just looking at those kids you've had from bed stay through testing that took the test. They also look at English language proficiency level, and they look at chronic absenteeism level. And for the high school, they add in a graduation rate.
And they do these by subgroups.
And they do, yes, and they do these by subgroups. The other thing I wanted to mention, I wrote a note so I wouldn't forget.
Economically disadvantaged.
Yes,
Special education.
Every demographic, students with disabilities, all students is actually a subgroup, everybody. The data for graduation is lagged a year. So that means our 24-25 results are based already on 23-24, but because graduation's lagged a year, it's 22-23 graduation results. So
It's confusing.
it's a lot to keep.
That's what I.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Obviously.
Because of August, they want to give us the credit for
Yeah.
August, so that's why it's an extra year in there. The scores, okay, so they have this little formula. You know me.
I know.
Can't help it so I do like a good little formula. We get credit for our level 2s. Or
Karen gets very excited when
did.
talking about
Our level 2s are
accountability.
level
Got a
3s,
formula.
level 4s. Our level 2s, they count once. Our level 3s count twice, 2 times level 3, 2.5 times level 4, divided by your denominator, whether it's the 95% or it's just the number of the kids you took it, times a 100 gives us a number. They rank all the schools in the state. They rank all the districts in the state. When they rank all the schools, you come up with a level 1, 2, 3, or 4. So when we look at these things, all these millions of little, I guess, calculations come out to give us a level for each subgroup.
Yeah.
So level 1 and 2 are the lower. Level 1 is the lowest. It's the bottom 10%. Level 2 is anywhere from 10.1 up to 50%. So you get
That's
right in the
good.
middle of the state and you're still getting a level 2. And then you got 50.1 to 75, level 3. And then anything above 75,
This is your top.
you're at the top, you're level 4. And then, so I think that's the leveling. During the rebuild phase, which again, that's this year, you're only identified for like that target TSI or the comprehensive school CSI. If you have that first scenario, which if you click the slide, you'll be able to see.
I just wanted to make
Oh,
sure no
sure.
one had any questions.
I just had a quick question. The absenteeism, that's excused and unexcused?
It is.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's 10 currently, that's going to change next year.
It will.
that's-
It'll
oh,
all
okay.
look different next year, but we won't talk about that.
But it's right now it's
This right
10%.
here is,
This
okay.
year,
Right.
it's 10% of what you've been instructional days enrolled, right?
So let's say my child,
Starts
Gets
in
the-
Voorheesville.
yep, has in Voorheesville, gets the flu,
Yes.
right? And then after that gets COVID,
Yes.
right? And then just ends up getting strep afterwards because literally that happens, right?
It could happen.
And you have a
An
kid missing
orthodontist.
15 days, right?
Yep.
Right? And then you got an orthodontist appointment or something else comes up. That child is considered chronically absent.
Okay, just checking.
If a student starts October 3rd
Mm-hmm.
and then is here and we're looking at the attendance in November and they've been out for 4 days,
Yeah.
3 days and 30,
Yeah.
I would still be chronically absent. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
So that is even
Okay.
like, I mean, the parent who takes their child out who gets flu and then they
Yes.
take their child out to go to Florida
Yeah,
for
If
5
it's an extra
days,
3 days. Or,
that's,
same.
you're
That's
still in the
Oh,
same
that
boat.
could still
Yeah.
show up.
Or you have a child who's truant,
Yeah.
those times, same boat.
Okay.
Yeah,
just-
that all, now, we're only gonna talk about now.
We're all talking about that.
That's what it
So they'll
currently
be A
is.
little different.
Yeah.
Right.
I-
So during.
Matt, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I just had a quick question. Are these strictly a creature of state regulation or law? Are these connected to every student succeeds in any
Boom.
way? Or,
They are, you have to have your accountability status because of the monies that
Because
was
of-
received.
it's okay.
But
Yeah.
the state had.
The
way
state has
state
control.
has done it.
Right.
They got permission from the federal government for that, yes.
Yeah, so there is a
There
connection.
is. It is because of the federal government that it
Yeah.
looks the way that we're doing.
Okay.
Sure. So the next one will show you the scenario.
I'm gonna move that
and,
now.
Frank, if you
I'm gonna
will,
move that, yeah, sorry.
So during this rebuild phase, this is the districts and the schools that are at that bottom of that bottom 10%. You would have to have a level 1 in both weighted achievement and in core subject performance to be able to even be identified. So they have very few that they're identifying as a target school for improvement or a comprehensive school. And then at the high school, it would be both weighted, core, and graduation rate, all getting that bottom 10% in the state. So they have made that a little bit more lax right now. That's the only scenario that they're. But I did want to show you some of our data. Move that thing again.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll keep moving it around. Okay.
Just to show you, I highlighted where we weren't a 3 and a 4 on here, just so that we would look, we'd be aware.
Oh, my
Oh, that
bad.
was
Sorry.
high school.
I was
The first one
trying to zoom in.
You
Sorry.
can see elementary.
I can't
So
figure out.
ED
That's okay.
is economically disadvantaged. And weighted is no surprise in many cases because we're counting the kids who didn't take the test. But where I also see a 2 under core subject, that stands out, right? That stands out to us when we're looking this over. In the middle school, we're looking at students with disabilities. I couldn't tell you right now if we are at the 49th or 50th percentile or we're down at the 12th percentile. I'm going to be pretty sure that we're not down at the bottom. But I just wanted to, in all transparency, show that piece. And then the high school one is next, Frank.
Yep.
And be able to just say, this is what we use as we start some planning. So we know economically disadvantaged is something that we've seen for a couple of years on these reports. So one thing that we did was we've used Title I money to expand our math person in the elementary to having full days. She's part-time, full day every other day. So for a few months this spring, we brought in, Kelly, you know this because we did the summer program. We did the summer tutoring, and last year was our first year to bring in busing, right, to help again with that need.
But we're doing in both of those instances that we aren't necessarily targeting the economically disadvantaged. Is that because we're not
Correct.
supposed to?
You're
Correct.
targeting all
You're,
students,
you're targeting,
but knowing that, so we know you're
Even
targeting.
though we're always falling down in economically disadvantaged.
We know who, we're,
target.
but we know we are targeting the economically disadvantaged students by targeting all students.
and by
Because if you,
and
yeah,
our-
yeah.
and our Title I funds come for that, but is for anybody who's struggling, right?
Right. But we know that if we look, we know our economically disadvantaged students are struggling. Therefore, we'll be a part of that program.
And to, you know, to really showcase what you do, what Sue does, specifically to math, you know, you're really targeting, you're looking at specific data and working with individuals, you know, individual small group students. And that has really grown too, don't you think, in the past few years, the targeting that you've done there. In the high school, actually, Ms. Cardillo has done quite a lot with, is this our high school one?
Yeah.
With the chronically absent.
Ton.
She's got tiered interventions. They're doing, you know, home visits. They're doing community, I'm trying to think of what it's called. Did I write it down? Community supports, prevention referrals.
Yes, tons. And they have the food, and they have the food insecurity pantry
in both
thing
places,
as well.
yep. They're checking the data more frequently. They're having family meetings as well.
And
So-
we have seen marked improvement
Yeah.
on certain students. It's been
So,
impressive.
you know, we're thinking, taking those next steps for that. I do have one more slide.
Any questions before we move on slides? Okay.
Next year, the reimagine phase, here's a teaser for you. So the weighted and the core subject, those will still be there, but they'll look a little different. We will continue to have the English language proficiency and graduation rate with no changes. They will bring back student growth and college career and civic readiness. And they will change chronic absenteeism to attendance. It'll look a little different. You'll kind of be looking at every student, not just those who are the chronically absent.
Karen, well done, by the way. Very nice. Any questions?
No.
Look at that, 5:21. All right.
All right,
Well,
Matt.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Matt.
Good seeing everybody.
Take care.
Okay, bye.